right, guys, a lot of you guys in the fantasy football playoffs, a lot of you guys in some fantasy football championships. This is a playoff starts and sits week 14. Now, it depends on your league. Some leagues may drag on, it depends where you are in your league, but either way, you got to win. So we're talking starts and sits, primarily the optimal starts, and I'll give you guys some red flags at the sit positions, guys you may want to consider sitting. For NFL, can you believe it or not, week 14. Week 14 is here. Football is here. Now, what I like about this time is that, I love fantasy football. I love the build up to fantasy football, but I kind of like it when seasons are dwindling, championships are happening, and then fantasy football is over, because then I can focus on the playoff games and just watch football. So I enjoy fantasy football more than anybody. Like, I love it when it's in season, but when it's done, there's a little bit of a relief because there's that pressure released. I could just focus on football and just watch those playoff games. So again, even though I'm sad that fantasy's done, there's still some sort of relief there, that I can watch some playoff games. So I'm excited. Now, in this episode, I'm going to give you guys the optimal plays at each position, starting with quarterback, running back. I'm going to actually give you guys some defense streamers as well, tight end and wide receivers as well. So I'm excited to dive into this. If you have any starts and sits questions, leave them below. Now, if you want direct access, head on over to my Patreon group, patreon.com/FFcounselor for direct access, guys. I'll leave a link here below. You could join the Fantasy Frontlines. We're going to start ramping up for next season, okay? Now, before we get into this show, before I get into everything, guys, head on over to Hooters.com or download the app, guys. Head on over to Hooters.com or download the app right now. Use code FFC20 to save $10 on an order of 30 or more on takeout or delivery, guys. This is your chance to save, guys, on some amazing football bundles they got going on right now. Order during the game and enhance that game watching experience. Available at select locations across the USA. The code you want to use is FFC20 to save. Hooters.com or go download the app. Now, upon checkout as well, once you order your amazing food, make sure you guys do grab the latest calendar, guys. Amazing here. You guys can keep track of all your dates right here. You can see here, again, I've got this on my wall. I got 2 copies here. Hooters.com, download the app, and make sure you guys get the calendar upon checkout. All right, guys? Now, let's dive into this here. Starting off with the quarterback position. First guy I want to talk about here that's got a good matchup, arguably the easiest matchup for his position, is Kirk Cousins. At the end of the day, man, he's been safe at best, but Kirk Cousins against Detroit should be a good matchup here. Los Angeles Rams. Walford. I don't trust him. I don't trust any quarterback that's not Stafford in his prime of last year. When we projected a decline, well, I did anyway, that Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford just wouldn't be the same Super Bowl hangover. I don't trust anybody else there, right? I don't. Make sure, especially for playoff week, you're starting guys that have been consistent at the quarterback position, all right? Do not take any chances this week. And I'm telling you, do not play with the quarterback position. Start somebody consistent, right? But I'm telling you, the guys have good matchups. You got Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson. Even though he's got a good matchup, I don't trust him. He's not going to give you safe numbers. He hasn't. 10, 10, and 11 or his past points the past 3 weeks. Unacceptable. Tannehill, if you want that safe floor of 13 points, go ahead and get Tannehill. Jared Goff, very inconsistent, but does have a good matchup. Lamar Jackson, I know he's banged up. Be careful there. Again, I haven't looked at his injury here. Let me just take a quick look here. Lamar Jackson, who exited the game, I think it was like a knee sprain, wasn't it? I don't have him in any of my leagues, so I kind of heard. Did not participate in practice Wednesday. Again, is not expected to play. It could miss multiple weeks with Tyler Huntley. Again, Baltimore Ravens quarterback does. Whoever starts there, it's probably not going to be Lamar Jackson. I would say, good matchup, but if you got better quarterback options, be aware of that, okay? Tua, great matchup. Pickett, don't trust him, decent matchup, okay? So those are the guys with good matchup. Again, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, to name a few, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Tua, all good matchups. Now, are you going to sit guys that have been consistent? Daniel Jones arguably has the toughest matchup for his position versus Philly. Divisional matchup. Do you sit Daniel Jones? If you don't have a better option, you don't sit him, but he's got the toughest matchup versus position. Just be aware of that, okay? Dak Prescott versus Houston. Again, I would start Dak Prescott either way. Pat Mahomes, tough matchup versus Denver secondary. I'm still not sitting him. Davis Mills set to return, but definitely going into a tough matchup versus Dallas. You definitely want to sit him. Tom Brady, man, I don't know if you guys saw that amazing win coming back to win that game versus the Saints last game. Amazing comeback. Amazing. Fifth hardest matchup versus position versus San Fran. Deshaun Watson, a lot of people ask me about Deshaun Watson. Do you start him? Again, getting off that, those massages and that rust, coming back in, had himself 6 points last week. Unacceptable. I don't trust him. Josh Allen, obviously, Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. Tough matchups versus position. Josh Allen versus the Jets, Hurts versus the Giants, and Burrow versus Cleveland. Relatively tough matchups, but you do not sit those guys, okay? Geno Smith, Kyler Murray, definitely going to want to start them if you have them, okay? So quarterback, it's pretty easy, especially if you're in year long. In DFS, I've given you guys those guys with optimal plays. You may want to consider a value play there with like a Trevor Lawrence. At the end of the day, man, start the guy that's, you've got the one you went to prom with, right? Like, I don't know how else to say it. The one you took to the dance all year, go with that, all right? Moving on to the running back position, I'm going to give you guys some optimal plays. Running back, again, you got your consistent guys, although Derrick Henry and a lot of other running backs last week just did not get it done. Derrick Henry, we're talking championships, we're talking playoffs, and he literally crapped the bed. I don't know how else to tell you this, like crapping the bed on the umpteenth degree. It was disgusting last week. Hopefully he picks it up this week, but I'm telling you, Derrick Henry does actually have a good matchup this week. It's decent versus Jacksonville. Now, there's some, by the way, before I go into these running backs, there is something I got to tell you. There's a lot of teams on bye here. So if you are in the fantasy football championships, this was that week that people were kind of like, I got to make sure I cover myself because it's a bit of a disaster if you've got players from Green Bay, Christian Watson, Indiana, Chicago, Atlanta, Saints, and Washington, all players on bye week. So there's some fantasy relevance here on bye. If you guys have Justin Fields and you're hoping that you can use him on this playoff week, you're not going to be able to. So again, 6 teams on bye, including the Packers and Bears. You've got some really good fantasy relevant players. And all you guys that drafted Jonathan Taylor, who I said avoid, was going to decline this year. He's missing your week 14 due to a bye week. So he's been injured all season, been declined all season, has only 4 touchdowns to his name compared to like 18 last year. And now he's missing your playoffs. So just something else to be aware of this year and maybe next year, actually, when you're making your draft picks. And again, this is why you got to accommodate for this and have a lot of depth at that running back position. It's going to hurt you, right? You got to be careful. So optimal plays, let's rip through this at running back. Zeke Elliott, I think you should start this week. But again, we see Pollard being that beneficiary. So Pollard definite start. Reason being, again, they said, apparently from what I hear, Jerry Jones was saying that Zeke Elliott was not starting last week due to some disciplinary actions. I think it was the first time he hasn't started since his career, like since he started in the NFL. I think, when was that, 2016 or something like that, 15? I think it was 16. Either way, Zeke Elliott is a good start this week. Obviously, 18 points last week. Going to get the red zone stuff, the goal line work. Tony Pollard as well. Raheem Mostert, I don't know if I really trust him, but Miami running backs do have a good matchup. Joe Mixon, he should be back, screwing a lot of people, including myself, last week in fantasy. Again, this is a guy that should have started last week. He had this concussion protocol, and the game that he exited, he was breakdancing outside. So I have no belief that this guy was hurt this entire time. So he's been good for weeks. Either way, he's been sitting. He should be starting yet again ahead of Samaj Perine this week, okay? Dante Foreman, if you want to start him, good start. Cam Akers, hard to trust, but good matchup. Kenneth Walker, now he went out, again, screwing a lot of fantasy teams as well. Went out with some sort of ankle problem. He ran to the side, and he was out for the rest of the game. I called him out on it on social media. He ends up blocking me. What a coward. Kenneth Walker has a good matchup. If he does play, he is startable. Hopefully he's not limited. Miles Sanders, good matchup. Rondemar Stevenson, good matchup. Saquon Barkley, good matchup. Should have a good week versus Philly. Decent matchup. And Philly can play tough sometimes. So just be cautious with Saquon, but it's going to be divisional. It's going to be a tough fought game. Something worth watching this week. Derrick Henry coming off a bad week. No way but up this week for him versus Jacksonville. Jamal Williams and Swift. Let's talk about that. Everybody told you to draft Swift, but I still think Williams is the guy getting all that goal line work. So we're going to see how that plays out, okay? Again, with this scenario with running back, start the guys that have been good. Austin Eckler had a down week last week, mid-range matchup. Do you sit him? No. You start Austin Eckler. You start Dalvin Cook. You start the guys that you spent high draft capital on. especially this week. Nick Chubb, mid-range matchup, definitely start him. I just want to make you aware, especially for DFS, who's got the tough matchup. ATN coming off terrible weeks, been absolute trash. Does have a tough matchup. Christian McCaffrey does have it in tough versus Tampa Bay. Just be aware of this, right? I'm not saying sit Christian McCaffrey. Does have it in tough. Najee Harris does have it in tough versus Baltimore's rush defense. Be aware of that. Isaiah Pacheco, tough matchup. Josh Jacobs, who's been red hot. Do you sit him? Absolutely not. He's been red hot, but has it tough versus Rams rush defense. So, again, guys that got it in tough. Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs. Do you sit Travis Etienne? I personally don't trust Etienne, but he's going to be a workhorse. If you got no better options, start him. James Conner, again, tough matchup. Do you sit him? No. I mean, he's going to be consistent, right? For you, someone that you can plug in. And Rachaad White, I like him, man. He's not bad. I would start Rachaad White, but again, tough matchup versus San Fran. If you got a better option, go with that. But if not, I mean, Rachaad White could be clutch. So Rachaad White, Travis Etienne, Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, Isaiah Pacheco, Dameon Pierce, even a tough matchup this week, coming off some boring and depressing weeks. He's playing Dallas this week. He's got it in tough. Josh Jacobs, Devin Singletary, all tough matchups versus position. Do you sit them? No, not necessarily. If you have better options, to go for it. But again, the key here, guys, the biggest takeaway is try to look for the most consistent players if you're torn between two players on your roster. We want to make sure that we start the right people this week, okay? Now, that being said, I'll give you a quick example here. We're going to get into wide receivers. Last week, when you look at consistency, I had Thielen and I had London in the super flex, right? And who do I start? Do I start London or Thielen? I look at consistency. Now, London had the better matchup last week, right? He had the better matchup. He actually ended up doing better than Adam Thielen last week. Even though Thielen was more consistent on the year, getting more targets, getting more volume his way, it was London that outperformed Thielen. Now, a big part of that could be because Kyle Pitts was out. Maybe, but still, at the end of the day, sometimes matchups do make a difference over consistency. So you make sure you make the right decisions. Okay, again, drop your questions below if you've got them, all right? All right, let's talk about wide receivers here real quick. Rip through them. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones got a great matchup. Deshaun Jackson, do I trust him? No. But anybody from Baltimore does have a good matchup. The problem is who's getting the ball there. That's a big question. Amon-Ra, a must start this week. Great matchup coming off a couple hot weeks there. Was a great value in drafts. Jerry Jeudy cannot be trusted, but does have a good matchup. Be aware. Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, both great matchup versus position. Jefferson's been hot the past couple weeks, playing Detroit this week. Treylon Burks, right? He was banged up. Take a look into that. I don't know if you saw that, got the touchdown, came down with the ball last week. Strong catch, but ended up, I think he got off on his own feet, walked off on his own feet. But Treylon Burks, just monitor that situation. If he's on concussion protocol, should be good. I think he was limited in practice. But Treylon Burks, good matchup versus position. Deontay Johnson, very inconsistent. George Pickens, saw a video of him saying, I want the ball more. He's not getting the ball, right? Bit of a diva kind of guy. I understand you want the ball. I understand the passion. But, they got to win and they got to spread the ball. And you're not the wide receiver one, let's be honest, as of right now anyway. So they've got a good matchup either way. Devontae Adams, red hot, been solid. The only real target there for Derek Carr. Great matchup versus position this week versus the Rams. Chris Godwin, good matchup versus position. Garrett Wilson, good matchup versus position versus Buffalo. Not bad. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, also good matchups versus position, right? A couple of guys that have it in tough, just be aware, but do you not necessarily sit them. Juju, I would definitely sit versus Denver. I don't trust that guy. Stephon Diggs, tough matchup versus the Jets, but definitely do not sit him. CeeDee Lamb, tough matchup versus Houston. Do not sit him. But I'm just making you aware it's tougher matchups. Just something to be in the back of your head. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, tougher matchup versus the Giants. Amari Cooper coming off a boring 8-point week, tough matchup versus position. DeAndre Hopkins versus New England, tough matchup versus position. And Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, tougher matchup versus position versus Miami. Just, again, making you aware that these guys are startable, but they are tougher versus position, okay? I would still go ahead and start Diggs. I would still go ahead and start some of the guys that have a tough matchup. Tyreek Hill, relatively tough. Jamar Chase, relatively tough, right? Some of them. Keenan Allen, I mean, if you don't have a better wide receiver, he's been pretty consistent. Tougher matchup versus position, but I would definitely start Keenan Allen, all right? Start your starters. Start the guys that are higher on the depth chart. Make sure you guys do that, all right? Tight end, I'm going to give you guys some defense streamers here. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, obviously start. TJ Hawkinson, he's been boring and safe at best, but definitely worth starting. Good matchup. Gerald Everett, George Kittle, rough couple weeks, man. When I say rough, really rough, but he does have it in easy versus Tampa Bay. They play tight ends a little bit lighter. Tyler Higbee, good matchup, very inconsistent, hard to trust. crazy quarterback situation. You don't know what's going to happen there, but he's got a good matchup on paper. Could be a crutch for his quarterback this week. Foster Moreau, very boring. Hunter Henry, good matchup and very inconsistent, very hard to trust. Gesicki, great matchup, but definitely don't start him. He's just been inconsistent. Hopefully you have a better tight end option for sure, okay? Cade Otton, tough matchup versus San Fran, but if you need that sneaky tight end, Cade Otton seems to be stepping up into that Tampa Bay offense as a relatively reliable target for Tom Brady, so just be aware of that, all right? So those are some of your tight ends you should be aware of potentially starting. Defenses here, guys. Defenses are very important, especially, guys, if you want to win your week and you start defenses. Again, before I do that, head on over to prizepicks.com. DFS lines, the code you want to use. Go enhance that game watching experience. Prizepicks.com, DFS line. Try it, guys. Parlay 2 to 5 of these props, more or less. Are the players going to get more or less rushing yards? Pick up 2 to 5 players, put them together. Easier way to win. More or less guys on them. That's all you select. Is Zeke going to rush more or less than X amount they've got slated there? Rushing yards, okay? Select more or less, right? 2 to 5 of them, put them together. Easier way to win. PrizePicks.com. Use code DFSLion. Double your first deposit up to $100. Go try it right now. All right, let's go some defense streamers here, guys. Cowboys versus Houston. They're probably taking on your team. You might want to be careful. Vegas versus, the Rams. That could be interesting here, especially with the quarterback disaster there. If you want the Raiders, they could be a good defense this week. Might be able to pick up off streaming. Seahawks versus Carolina. Chiefs versus Denver could be interesting. Denver's been a disaster. Cardinals versus New England. Ravens versus Pittsburgh. Patriots versus Arizona, okay? Honorable mentions, Bills, Jags, Bucks, and Panthers. Also decent defenses you may want to consider starting this week. All right, guys? If you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe. We're winding down this season, but I'm going to keep you guys in the loop. Latest news, notes, fantasy football news, everything you need, including, guys, start talking about and working into next year, including some fantasy football 101 to get you guys prepared, all right? If you're new, make sure you guys subscribe. We'll talk soon. Appreciate you. NFL Week 14 is here. Start them, sit them. Let's get them.